Good morning, film fans. Wanted to take a brief time to talk about one of my favorite, actually, what is my favorite science fiction movie, Blade Runner. I've been seeing a lot of videos out on YouTube lately that, quite frankly, I think are kind of crap. And it sounds like people really don't know what the hell they're talking about. And I don't know if this is just an effect of the fact that the people who are reviewing these movies don't seem to have seen the original theatrical cut or the director's cut. It seems like the only thing they're talking about is the final cut, which is actually my favorite version. But without reference to these others, they're kind of missing the point. Even the ones that do discuss them seem like they're kind of missing the point in certain ways. I know that this is going against the grain, but that's something that I do quite often, and I have no problem doing it because I happen to believe certain things about the movie that a lot of people don't, and I don't care if my opinion is different. I've watched this movie about 400 times, and that's not an exaggeration, in all different versions. I have a particular penchant for 2007's The Final Cut. I also like the work print, which had substitute music because Vangelis' soundtrack was not complete at the time that it was done. So it uses some of Jerry Goldsmith's Planet of the Apes movie music in certain spots. I happen to love that soundtrack, but and also insert certain scenes and a slightly different voiceover, which is slightly better as regards Roy Batty's death, but is still monotonous, and I'm glad they cut it out in the final cut. Clearly, Ford didn't want to do it, although it was in the original script. That's something that's a misconception that he tacked it on at the last moment. No, it was always in the script. He objected to it. He didn't like it. He didn't think it was necessary. But apparently, especially after the Denver and Dallas sneak previews, it was felt that people thought the movie was confusing. That they didn't understand it. They didn't understand what was going on. So additional voiceover dialogue was added. It's not that there was not a voiceover; there always was, but it was added to an extent that it became ridiculous. He ends up like Ida the Explainer, the person who sits in the movie, say, "Oh, look, Irving, they're in a boat now." You don't need that kind of explanation either from the audience or from the actors. And I think that the final cut makes that obvious. What's going on? Just freaking pay attention, people. Watch the movie. Don't gab. Don't eat popcorn. Watch the damn movie, and you'll understand what's going on. Um, as far as the central question, which keeps coming up over and over again, I find that it's actually become boring, is the question of whether Deckard is or is not a replicant. I don't think it really matters to the overall plot, but I'll give my particular opinion. I do not think he is. I think he's human. And I think it's important that he's human because it's a contrast to what the replicants are, and particularly the idea that uh, replicants are not supposed to possess empathy. But in the end, it's the replicants, not the humans, who are more empathetic and sympathetic than the humans who are hunting them. Deckard and Gaff and Bryant are all mean, nasty, vicious kind of characters who we don't really have a lot of sympathy for. And the replicants are presented as people who just want to live. They're just fighting for survival. As Roy Batty says to Eldon Tyrell, "I want more life, Father." He's appealing to a man who is not his God, but his creator, literally, his sort of Victor Frankenstein to his Frankenstein's monster, saying, "I want more life." He's a child talking to an absent father and begging, "Why did you have me if you weren't going to care for me?" That kind of thing, which is the central tenet of Frankenstein, too. That's why the monster rebels against Victor and kills his wife and all that, because again he's a child who's been rejected, left alone by his parent, and that theme plays out through Blade Runner as well. These people are created as slaves and warriors, and then abandoned and given this 4-year lifespan, which limits their existence to such a ridiculous degree that they're going to want more. That's the central tenet. I don't think it matters if Deckard is a replicant or not. Whether his unicorn dream has anything to do with the fact that Gaff leaves a origami unicorn at the end of the movie, I think is sort of a red herring. It's a MacGuffin, as Hitchcock would call it. Yeah, it's pointed out in the dream sequence that maybe how would Gaff know that he had a unicorn dream unless that dream was an implant. Well, maybe it's not, because I always thought, both in the theatrical cut and the director's cut and the final cut, that the unicorn was meant to represent Rachel. She's something unique. She's the unicorn. She's the replicant who has no termination date. She's the goal of Deckard's quest and what he's really fighting for. And so it makes sense that they end up together in the end. Um, I've pointed out in my video, which I call Dark Future, Dark Past, the similarities between Blade Runner and The Big Sleep, which is its obvious progenitor. Obviously, the film noir influences are, littered throughout the movie. The dark, rainy Los Angeles, the jaded ex-cop who's, Deckard, who is kind of goaded into one last case, just as Marlowe is kind of lured into, finding out what's going on with Carmen Sternwood in The Big Sleep. And the fact that the plot is murky, it includes a lot of dangerous women. Zora and Pris and Rachel are all kind of, femme fatales in the film noir sense, just as Vivian Regan and Eddie Mars's wife, and even the taxi driver, the bookstore girl, and of course Carmen Sternwood are all these seductive femme fatale types. Even the cigarette girl in Eddie Mars's nightclub, Joy Barlow, is a very seductive girl, and they play out on those stereotypes throughout the both of these pictures, and I think that's important. That's an important theme overall in the man lost in this web of sort of seduction, and trying to figure out which is really the right girl for him, which is and again, Deckard has to figure this out too. Is it Pris? Is it Zora? Is it Rachel? Is it none of them? And ultimately it turns out that it is Rachel, which is ironic because this is the person he's supposed to hunt. This is the person he's paid to kill, and he can't, because he falls in love with her. And that's, again, one of the central tenets of the movie. People seem to be ignoring that. They're focusing on little tiny facts that don't really make a difference. Okay, yeah, there's a toy unicorn in J.F. Sebastian's apartment. I think that's ridiculous. So what? There's lots of toys in there. I have watched this movie probably in excess of 100 times in the various versions, and I'm still noticing new things. I had not noticed that until I turned the soundtrack up, that there is a doll in Sebastian's apartment who keeps asking, "Would you like a cup of tea? Would you like a cup of tea? Would you like a cup of tea?" Over and over. I never heard that. I never saw it. In all the times I've seen it, until the last time I watched the final cut again, in Spanish apparently. But one of the interesting things about the Spanish version, which has subtitles, is you can hear a lot of the background dialogue better because they're highlighting it, and the things that they're saying at Leon's interview, the background things that they're saying are kind of interesting, and they're sort of lost in the English version because they're just background noise. You don't really hear what people are saying. Also, some of the communications that Gaff is listening to in the spinner car when they're going to the Tyrell Corporation, orders from the police department and things about where the replicants might have been sighted, are missed if you don't hear the background. And having it spelled out in subtitles actually was helpful, I thought, in that version, which is one reason I kind of recommend you watch it. But anyway, getting back to these, reviews I've been seeing have been kind of, lame, and they're going over the same old ground over and over again. Is Deckard a replicant? Is Deckard not a replicant? It doesn't really matter. As I said, I think the central thing that matters is and this is the heart of the book as well, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, is he asked the question, are androids just as good as humans? Is there anything that really separates them? In the book, there are a few things that aren't in the movie, and I kind of agree with leaving them out of the movie because they weren't that essential. One is that the reason that there are so few living animals, there's been a Third World War, which is referred to as World War Terminus in the book. The world has become, quote unquote, kippleized. Kipple is garbage. There's garbage everywhere. There's huge garbage heaps outside Los Angeles. That's not shown in this movie, but it is shown somewhat in Blade Runner 2049, where you see like that area where Kay goes, where he's looking for the orphans, is full of kibble. It's full of garbage and old electronic parts that they're scavenging and that kind of thing. That's very much in context with the kibble mentioned in the book. The other thing is that there's a one way they can tell that androids do not have empathy is that they don't believe in this religion called Mercerism. What Mercerism is there's this kind of Sisyphus-like character called Johnny Mercer who has to struggle up a hill as people throw rocks at him. And people have what's called an empathy box, and you place your hands into the empathy box, and as the rocks strike Mercer, you are actually physically cut by the empathy box. And this proves that you have empathy with Johnny Mercer's struggle. Well, the androids don't like this, and they in fact construct in one scene a fake film studio, where they have an old drunk actor who's actually the person who's playing Johnny Mercer. And they're using this to try to dissuade Deckard from his faith. It doesn't actually work because he finds out that this studio is a fake and escapes. That, I think, leaving that out of the movie, I think was made sense because it's kind of a cumbersome. And it's not necessary. In the movie and the book, the two ways to detect a replicant or an android are the Voigt-Kampff test, which is a test of involuntary dilation of the iris, and in response to emotional questions, and a bone marrow test. The bone marrow test is not used in the movie, but that's one way in the book. The androids had different bone marrow composition, so that could be done by the police, and they could find out somebody was an android. Other than that, they're particularly the types who have a quote-unquote nexus-type brain are almost identical to humans, and there's no real way to tell who they are except to do these two tests. When Deckard in the book exposes Rachel, Pris, I should say, who is a copy of Rachel, as an android, she becomes very angry and goes to his home and kills this Nubian goat that he had bought with his bounty money. And the final scene is he and his wife find a frog, which they think is real, and they take it home. It turns out it's artificial, but they're going to care for it anyway, which emphasizes that it doesn't matter if something is real or an android or a fake. As long as somebody cares for it, it's important, to that person anyway. That wasn't quite as emphasized in the movie, as the replicants are portrayed as evil. But we find out slowly that they're really not evil. Yeah, the Pris is seductive, and she's trying to seduce J.F. Sebastian with her, considerable feminine wiles, considering it's Daryl Hannah, and uses him to her own end, or to her and Roy's end, since they're the ones who are actually in love. Not, she's not in love with J.F. She kind of flirts with him. And also, with Zora, who is hiding out, and she and Leon were involved. But again, it's a good movie. It plays on some very simple questions, which are present throughout Philip K. Dick's work. What makes us human? Could an android, given human memories, become human? Are we more than just the sum of our memories? These are questions that Dick asks over and over again in his work. Whether or not those works include androids or robots or alien beings or other scenarios, he asks those kind of questions over and over again and makes us think about them, which is one of the reasons I like pretty much every novel of his. The other thing I like is that he tends to take ordinary people and put them in extraordinary circumstances. Like in the Simulacra, two piano salesmen are being put out of job by electronic pianos. So nobody wants to buy a piano anymore. So they're forced into sort of this situation where they have to go to, I think it's Mars, and try to sell their pianos there. And that's kind of an interesting conundrum. So again, you're taking ordinary Joes and putting them into an extraordinary circumstance. And Dick excelled at that. And I think that's kind of the case with Deckard. Deckard's just a retired cop who is having has something of an inimical relationship with his wife, unless she turns up her quote-unquote Penfield mood organ to the right setting so that she doesn't hate him. And Penfield was a real person, by the way, a real scientist who worked on things like mood. And Dick was very well aware of that. And he's a bounty hunter hunting these androids so he can get money to buy an artificial animal, because real animals are ridiculously expensive because most of them are dead because of the radiation from World War Terminus. That element is present in Blade Runner in the Anemoid Row sequence when Deckard goes to find out whether the snake scale he found in Leon's bathtub is from a fish or from a snake. And he goes to the fish lady and she puts it under the scanning electron microscope and sees the manufacturer's number on it and realizes that it's artificial, and then leads him to Abdul Hassan, who leads him to Taffy Lewis's, who leads him to Zorro, who almost kills him. And that's, again, the one of the pivotal scenes in the movie. I love Joanna Cassidy in that movie. I thought she was great. One of my favorite redheads. And anyone who knows me knows I like redheads. Again, I think a lot of the people who seem to be watching it these days, like I said, they're missing the forest for the trees. They're looking at little details. Ooh, this means Deckard's a replicant. That means Deckard's a replicant. The fact that his light shines off his eyes means he's a replicant. No, I don't think that's true at all. I think, people are being ridiculous about it. And I think you can just enjoy the movie for what it is and pay attention, and you'll get a lot more out of it than if you sit there nitpicking details for proof that somebody is one thing or another thing. Enjoy and have a nice day.